Brandon Barnard, 2000.
Billy Joe Allen, 1998.
Glenn Davis, 2005.
Mark Snar, 2010.
Lisa Montgomery, 2007.
Wesley Perkey, 1998.
Bruce Webster, 1996.
Richard Tipton, 1993.
Corey Johnson, 1993.
Danny Lee, 2000.
Alejandro Umana, 2010.
Edward Fields, 2005.
Joseph Duncan, 2008.
I'll get by. Slowly pull myself together.
Of the 22,000 homicides committed every year, approximately 100 people or less are sentenced to death.
There's no escape, so keep me safe. This
Any last
feels
words?
so
God forgive me.
unreal. Nothing comes easily. Nothing's like it seems. Turn my grief to gray.
Well, as a community that believes in forgiveness and that everybody has a chance to make amends with God until the very end, the death penalty takes that away from the person who has committed the crime. We don't know how long, if ever, that person may realize what he or she has done wrong and reconcile with God. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm against it.
Nothing comes easily. Feel this.
Since the reinstatement of the death penalty, 142 men and women have been released from death row nationally, some only minutes away from execution.
Did you learn anything new about the death penalty from the production of Dead Man Walking?
Well, one of the things I learned, having grown up in the late 60s and into the 70s, knowing about Gary Gilmore in Utah and the death penalty there, you're thinking, okay, well, every state is going to be different. Well, finding out how many had the death penalty and then scaled back from it. For instance, learning in Illinois that a number of things had occurred where people were put to death and found out later that they were innocent, that the governor finally said, okay, no more death penalties. We will not put anybody to death until we get this system right. So to be confronted with those facts all laid out there in front of you as opposed to a news story here and there was probably the big thing.
Why do you think society views the death penalty as a reasonable punishment?
We as society get angry very easily, and we see it on the news all the time with what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri, and all these other places where these things are happening. People are getting very, very angry, and so you see something and you feel justified in taking out your anger. You know, how dare you kill a child? How dare you kill a defenseless human being? How dare you do this? You know, there was a thing yesterday my wife told me about. This dog was deaf and blind, and somebody jumped over the fence and decapitated it. And some people would immediately call for the death penalty for this. We get angry very, very quickly when we see things that are unjust, and we want vengeance.
I'm on my knees, only memories are left.
Lethal injection is the most used form of execution in the United States.
Don't know how, but I'll get by. Slowly pull myself.
What do you think an alternate punishment would be instead of the death penalty?
An alternate to the death penalty is definitely life in prison without parole. The person, if it was murdered, whose life was taken will never get out, but
There's no escape.
a parole person has a chance to live, and I don't think he or she should have that chance.
Although isolated passages of religious scripture have been quoted in support of the death penalty, almost all religious groups in the U.S. regard execution as immoral. In 82% of studies reviewed, race was found to influence the likelihood of being charged with capital punishment or the death penalty.
Some theological figureheads, however, were in support of the death penalty, which adds to the controversy of the subject. One of these is St. Thomas Aquinas, who claimed, "If a man be dangerous and infectious to the community on account of some sin, it is praiseworthy and advantageous that he be killed in order to safeguard the common good." A perspective like this one shows the reason why people in our society today think the death penalty is a reasonable punishment for a crime committed. However, in reality, our views on the death penalty should be in accordance with the Church's teachings. No crime committed is so terrible to be punishable by death.
Although more than 30 years have passed since the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty, the topic still sparks heated debate on issues like race, gender, class, and method of execution.
In 2013, executions had decreased almost 10% since 2012, and 60% since they peaked in 1999.
Do you believe there is a crime so terrible that could be punishable by death?
As a Catholic, I'm taught that the death penalty is wrong. I've never been in a situation where someone close to me was murdered, so I don't know. I know people who have had that situation happen to them, and they won the death penalty. Where do we draw the line? I don't know. And I guess really the thing to do, if you're going to practice Catholicism, then you've got to buy in wholeheartedly. In which case, then you have to say, well, then that's in God's hands and let God be the judge. But as a human being, you demand justice if your spouse is killed or your child is killed. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I hope to God I'm never tested like that, because knowing me, as combative as I am, if I'm in a courtroom and my child or my spouse was killed by somebody, I'm probably going after it. Probably do it with my own bare hands.
Do you think there is a better way for the Church to express that capital punishment is morally and ethically wrong?
You know, I don't know. I think Francis I is doing some great things. And I think there's always, the constant search for a better way of doing it. But, I believe John Paul II said, no. No means no. Is there a compassionate approach to getting forth, across to people to say the death penalty is wrong in all situations and we are not God, let God judge? But we're human beings and we still have that need for revenge. And I don't know if you can ever take that. You can't take it away from a human being. You want revenge. It's how that person has to deal with it. So the Church can do a fine job in teaching that. But unless we're in that situation, do we really know how we'll behave? And so, for me to say the Church should be doing a better job, I don't think I can say that. I think the Church has done a fine job of that.
Scientific studies have consistently failed to demonstrate that executions deter people from committing crime any less than long prison sentences.
As Catholics and people in the ministry class, we're so easy to just say, yes, it's not ethical, because we know, according to the Bible and according to teachings, only God can judge and only God decides when it's right to take someone's life. But the reason that people struggle so much with deciding if it is ethical or if it's not ethical is because of the fact that you have to think what the families are going through. You have the Matthew Poncelet story that the school did in Dead Man Walking, where the family was devastated. They didn't want to see this guy live because their kids don't live. They feel in their heart, why should he live when my kid's not living? And yes, that's obviously a reasonable, thing to think, but at the same time, your kid might not be living, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to take away someone else's right. Yes, what he did was wrong, but no, you can't do what's wrong, what you feel is right because you're thinking in the moment. It's kind of like with the jury, how they make sure that jury is filled with impartial people. If you have any relation to the person, they're not going to put you on the jury because you're going to be thinking from the heart, not from what you know is ethical and what you know is right. And that's mainly why also when they're picking the jury, they try their hardest not to get people who are Catholic or religious, because they don't want those people who know it's not ethical to sentence someone to death. And it's not like this is some far off foreign, thing that we don't really need to think about today. Capital punishment is actually a big topic still, and, right now, especially, you hear about the Boston bombing and how that teen that did it is being trialed for death. And, he's not much older than us, but someone would be okay taking his life because they feel that he should not get to live when, because of him, someone else had to die. And that's the problem, is that we're making that decision. And it's like we learned in class with the whole, we don't have the right to call someone's life cheap, because when you're calling it cheap, you're saying it's worthless. God didn't create this person to be a worthless person. He created him to be something. And just because he strayed the wrong way doesn't mean that God can't offer him forgiveness. God forgives everyone, and there's not going to be that point where he won't. And we have no right to kill someone because we feel that they don't get the chance to show forgiveness, to get forgiveness, or to show that they're sorry for what they've done. And we just have to see it from a more ethical standpoint and not see it as, what emotions tell
The
us.
Catechism of the Catholic Church informs us that Scripture specifies the prohibition contained in the Fifth Commandment: do not slay the innocent and the righteous. The deliberate murder of an innocent person is gravely contrary to the dignity of the human being, to the Golden Rule, and to the holiness of the Creator. The law forbidding it is universally valid. It obliges each and everyone, always and everywhere. Assuming that the guilty party's identity and responsibility have been fully determined, the traditional teaching of the Church does not exclude recourse to the death penalty, if this is the only possible way of effectively defending human lives against the unjust aggressor. If, however, non-lethal means are sufficient to defend and protect people's safety from the aggressor, authority will limit itself to such means, as these are more in keeping with the concrete conditions of the common good and more in conformity with the dignity of the human person. Today, in fact, as a consequence of the possibilities which the state has for effectively preventing crime, by rendering one who has committed an offense incapable of doing harm, without definitively taking away from him the possibility of redeeming himself, the cases in which the execution of the offender is an absolute necessity are very rare, if not practically non-existent.
Do you think some people find the death penalty as an easy way out of finding a real reasonable punishment?
I don't know if it's the easy way out. I think it's just their first impulse, their first instinct. Let's do that. Okay? Oh, you are guilty of it? You claim you're guilty? Take you out and shoot you right now. Okay, now you've done that. All right, can you live with that decision? Oh, I know I can live with it, but can you really? I think it's the quick solution. Maybe easy way out is probably a good way of saying it. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I could. I wish Sister Helen Prejean was sitting here next to me, because I got to speak with her once, and that was pretty phenomenal. And she has all these answers.